Hello everybody, and welcome to Whiz, your family-friendly podcast where we discuss D&D Onslaught, Dice Masters, HeroClix, and the other entertaining games made by Wizkids. I'm WizDad, that bard in your party that heals you and has a way too strong party-wide inspiration that just increases your chance to crit and just lasts forever. I will be your guide for navigating the competitive and casual scenes of the Wizkids Triforce of gaming. It is Onslaught Wednesday, and we have quite a bit to talk about from Worlds and the future of Onslaught. So let's kick things off with an all-Onslaught Wizkids Progress Report.
Kowalski, Progress Report.
So as I mentioned in my Tuesday special edition of Whiz, for the HeroClix fan appreciation, nothing really came out of it for Onslaught. It was very much a HeroClix-centric fan appreciation. So there was no special information or anything to come out of that. Now, fortunately, like I mentioned in the previous episode, Nicholas Yu, one of the lead designers, the man on the front of the box, was there, as was Alex Davey, the director of miniature games at WizKids, and they were full front there for Onslaught, and they were able to talk to me. I did a couple interviews, which will be going up on my YouTube. I'm hoping to at least have one of them up this week, and the other one maybe this weekend or next week. And they were able to kind of give a little peek behind the curtain of what's coming for Onslaught. Nothing officially as in the way of like, oh yeah, this date, this is coming out. But there are things on the way. There are definitely plans on the way. It's just they weren't shown at the fan appreciation. What we do know, obviously, is that Frogmire Coven comes out in October, so a month from now. I will say, having played Frogmire Coven, because it was available at Worlds, it is fantastic. It is definitely a good expansion, like an improvement on the base game. And it kind of, once you see Frogmire Coven, it kind of puts things into better perspective. When you look at the base game, the scenarios are kind of introductory scenarios. There's a few things you could do with it. And then you could buy all the, you could get the like benefactor and all that stuff. When you get to Frogmire, things are taken up a degree. And that makes sense, right? A base set should be that, a base set. Here is kind of a good, plain entry into the game. And then the expansions and factions and all of that is what starts adding more layers to this onion that is Onslaught. And yeah, I will emphasize again, Frogmire Coven is fantastic. I read through the scenarios. I'm gonna do an unboxing for the channel also here probably next week. I'll have it posted. And the tournament scenarios were incredibly fun. It was nice to see scenarios that you didn't get bonuses, you didn't get victory points for engaging with your opponent. Like some of the different tournament scenarios you encounter are, if you KO an enemy character, you get 1 victory point. Well, there were some scenarios where you don't get any points for that. So engaging with your opponent was kind of not at the forefront. You still could just slow them down, but it was really just how would I explain it? Like a PvP, PvE, where you're both trying to reach your goal first without necessarily interacting. You do a little dance and maybe you Sedona an NPC at someone else, but other than that, it's attacking your opponent is kind of a waste of time if you're trying to complete all the other steps. And I'll go more into the different tournament scenarios in the Fishing with WizDad segment. So absolutely pick up the Frogmire Coven expansion. The 2 maps are great also. Definitely adds a lot of different colors and artwork than what you are used to in the base set. So having the availability of 4 maps as opposed to 2. Of course, who doesn't want to have double the maps? And then once again in November is the Ancient Construct figure. Alex and Nick talked about it a bit in their interviews, but it is definitely going to be interesting. It is a figure that takes up 2 initiative slots on your team, so it'll be able to work twice. And when it's effectively when it gets lower on health, it drops down to 1 initiative slot. So very cool concept. It has different attachments you'll be able to attach to it that to make it like more of a mage, to make it more melee, to make it more of a like a ranged attacker. It's a really cool concept. This is what I mean by like adding layers, adding wrinkles to the game. And I hope this continues. I immediately went to my store when I got back. I went yesterday, and I made sure they had the construct to pre-order, or at least attempted to pre-order it. I don't know if we'll still get it. It's a little late. It's September, but either way, I'm gonna try. Usually Alliance is pretty good about that for us, but yeah, I ran out and immediately tried to get them to order the OP kit, so that way I can start promoting the game in my store. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't say in the Wizkids progress report, congratulations to Brian Davis, who is the first world championship for Onslaught. He won the Wizkids Worlds Onslaught championship there. Played through 6 round robin rounds sounds funny, and then won in the finals with Harper's. Fantastic. I'll have the finals game. That's probably what I'm going to post first onto my YouTube, is I do have the finals game. I was able to record all of that, so I have to go and match some audio, add some pizzazz to it, and I'll put it on YouTube for everybody to watch. It was a very interesting game. It utilized one of the zombie horde scenarios from Frogmire Coven. You can check out that scenario, by the way, on D&D Onslaught. They have the tournament scenarios for Frogmire on there, so go check it out. You can see for yourself. And so yeah, they played that one, and that was great. Definitely something to watch. Once I put it up, I'll post on my Facebook when it's posted. And yeah. So with that, I guess I should mention the things that I learned coming down the pipe is there is going to be a lower dollar entry level into Onslaught. They are planning on I don't want to say a starter, but like kind of a starter level thing where it's just going to be a lower price point. They couldn't go into specifics of like how many characters or what all's included, but know that it is going to be significantly cheaper. It's not going to be the $150 price point, but also know that it's not going to probably be at the same quality of like, fully painted minis. It might be, but it might be like less amounts. Remember, in the base set, you got, a young adult dragon, you've got an Etten, you got some gnolls, kobolds, and then you have the 6 pieces for each faction. I could see, and once again, they didn't go into specifics when I did the interview, I could see them maybe dropping like the young black dragon and maybe some of the minis as well, drop it down to like gnolls and kobolds, because most of the scenarios in the base game only use those. The Etten maybe, or the ogre, but either way, you could take out some of those minis. You could drop it down to 5 of each faction instead of 6, or make it where it's just like a smaller introduction and say it's only 3 minis for a faction that already exists, and it could be brand new minis, and that way you could say, oh, it's a new thing for Red Wizards, and then you could just buy the faction pack to add the rest of them. Like a smaller, here's a taste of Onslaught, enough for you to be able to play, but moving forward, you should go buy that. Either way, it's on the horizon now. I would not expect it, obviously, this year. Next year, hopefully, is when it will be coming out, but keep in mind, these things do take time. So I'm hoping for like a middle of 2024 type scenario, which you could hope that it arrives sooner rather than later, because I know price is one of the detriments to the game right now. It's a little too pricey to build a huge community or for stores to take a chance. Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about what happened to Worlds. Let's talk about the games themselves, and let's get into fishing with WizDad.
Get your gear, little man. We're going fishing. And I mean now.
So if you didn't listen to my last episode, well, shame on you. You should have. It was a kind of a recap of how my weekend and how my worlds went, essentially. I promised in that episode that I would kind of go more into detail about how Onslaught went at Worlds, and hey, guess what? That's what we're going to do now. So, once again, Worlds was about 6 rounds. It was a little wonky just because there was only 8 players. I could go into a little bit of specifics why that occurred. I think purely it was a little bit of a, a marketing snafu. A tiny bit, just a tiny bit. So, once again, if you looked at the World's Wizkids page that detailed the event schedule, it was really bare bones of Onslaught. Like, incredibly bare bones. It listed the World Championship, which was on Friday, and was supposed to end on Saturday with a single elimination. And then it listed the Battle Royales, like, just only on Saturday. And then didn't really even go into much detail about what it included. When I talked to Mitchell, the marketing person, he was also confused about why it was only that specific on Saturday. And even the banners that they made showed only BRs on Saturday. But the intent was always to have Battle Royales the entire weekend. Even demos, they were running the entire Worlds. So that was kind of a mismark. I don't know what happened, a miscommunication. It definitely should have been shown that, hey, Onslaught's there all weekend. It is not just a one-day thing. The other thing, I mentioned this to WizKids staff. You know, at Gen Con, we had multiple different scenarios. We had the Death Knight scenario, which was a fun, like, sit down, play the cool scenario, and people leave with the Death Knight cards and the Death Knight minis. And they were cool. Now the minis were just kind of the unpainted WizKids like Death Knight minis, which were perfectly fine, perfectly acceptable pricing. But that was a cool scenario to play. And so I was a little sad that they didn't run any of those. They probably should have, and just had a couple of those scheduled throughout Worlds, like 3 or 4, so that way you could get more people sitting down. Because as I was watching Onslaught throughout Worlds, you know, it was kind of empty for the first, like Thursday, there wasn't very many people. There was a lot of people like walking by, looking at it, maybe running some demos. But it wasn't until Friday and Saturday that things started picking up. Because keep in mind, who all is there at Worlds? At this point, because Dice Masters wasn't really there, not that many Dice Master players were there. It's primarily HeroClix players. Onslaught players showed up probably on Friday, mostly on Friday to play in the tournament. But the goal of having Onslaught there also is to kind of get some HeroClix players to join. You know, there was probably over 300 people, unique people at Worlds, maybe more, to be honest. But it was, you know, the goal of Onslaught is, you know, you should get some HeroClix players to try to join the game. They like minis. A lot of them probably play D&D. They should be trying to get those players. The schedule wasn't really conducive for that, which hopefully that'll be something they change going forward, keeping in mind what some of the other scheduling is. But I did see going into Saturday, even Sunday, when things had wrapped up a lot for HeroClix and it was kind of people are just hanging out before going home, there were a lot of HeroClix players starting to do some Onslaught BRs, starting to do like, hey, I want to just try the game, because they had a bunch of games set up. It was great on how Onslaught staff had everything set up. They had multiple tables of the base game set up. They had multiple tables of the Frogmire Coven set up, so you saw Froghemoth sitting there. And then they had pulled out all the different cards, all the different characters for the Battle Royales, because it was a draft process where you drafted 3 characters to go into the battle. So that all was great. The BR format, I think, was fantastic. I think a lot of people liked it. I think the prizing was amazing for it, to be honest. Because what they did, ultimately, and I don't know if this will be the method going forward, but basically you played in a BR, and when you sat down to play, whoever won left with a faction pack or the expansion pack pretty much of their choice. You know, they had many arrows, red wizards. They had their faction packs there, and then the expansions for Harper's and Zentarum. So for mine, I left with the Red Wizard faction pack because I played them that weekend, and I love the Red Wizards, and I thought, heck yeah, I want Red Wizards. They're great, and so I was able to pick up that faction pack, and now I just have to go get the expansion, and I'm good to go. But let's talk a little bit. First off, before we break into what everyone played, I do want to mention, because I failed to mention it in the previous segment, the progress report. Brian Davis won it all, but he did face in finals Doug Howe. I think it's Howe, or Hall. Doug, I believe, went undefeated in round robin and met Brian in the finals. So I wanted to make sure Doug got his respect. He did he did incredibly well. You know, in the finals, which you guys will see on the YouTube again, it was just some key dice rolls that didn't go his way, and obviously the play of Brian and Doug himself. It was very, digging into a scenario that was new and that changed on the fly a little bit as well. It was a very interesting finals. My goal for the Worlds was to at least record one match. I did record a few others that I will put up as well. Some of the round robin matches, I believe I was able to record, I think, one or two other matches, because I think that's what Onslaught ultimately needs now, is more visibility, more showing what the competitive side is, because a lot of people, I think, are losing the fact that Onslaught is not just it's not like a Trials of Tempest game. Like, it's not just your standard D&D $150 price point. You sit down, you play through scenarios, you're done. It is a skirmish competitive game. It can be, I should say, that you can do that with scenarios. You can take it home, spend it with your significant other, spend time playing through scenarios, or with your friends, play through some scenarios and have a fun campaign. But then you could also do some tournament play and sit down and pick a team and play through some tournament scenarios. So I think the flexibility is what the big appeal should be about Onslaught. So once again, there were 8 players, including myself. Out of the 8 players, if I remember correctly, there were 2 Red Wizards, which included myself. There was 1 Zentarum, and then there were 5 Harpers. Very much a drastic change from Gen Con. Gen Con, I felt like there was a lot more Zentarum, and I think that really shows that certain factions just aren't inherently that much stronger than others, except for many arrows, as we've talked about, is just not quite there yet. That really Harpers and Zentarum are pretty balanced when it comes to fighting each other. Sure, some might do better in certain scenarios, and I think that's what we saw here. At Gen Con, you did not have the Frogmire scenarios. They also had changed some of the scenarios, like the placement of certain things from Gen Con. Gen Con, you could use Lasael, or however you say the person's name, a little bit from Zentarum to kind of get a little bit more loot than you were supposed to be getting because of how fast Lasael is. And, that advantage would lead a lot of people to play in Zentarum, especially the group from, I don't know where Brian's group is, St. Louis. I'm sorry, Brian, if you listen to this. And Lexi, I don't know where your group is located. But either way, they talk through this a lot. They are very much, they work together on, building out the most complete meta teams or competitive teams. So in this case, it was Harper's for one reason I alluded to in the introduction, and her name is Chloe. This was brought up to Alex and Nick, and they were very responsive to it, realizing, Chloe might be a little too good on Harper's. Inspiration is cool. Once again, if you don't know what she does, she has a inspiration ability. It's a bonus action 5-turn cooldown. Gain Inspiring. Friendly characters at range 0 to 5 gain +2 to their highest attack rolls and +1 damage with basic attacks. That is huge. Massive. Especially if you plan it correctly and play Chloe early in the initiative for first turn. Have her do inspiration, get her into position, and then next turn have her go last, because inspiration goes away by the time her next activation, at the end of her next activation. So that would give you effectively 2 turns with a +2 to their highest attack roll and the +1 damage. I will say arguably the +1 damage is probably the most important, because that adds up quickly. Tag that with Grabbleshanks, who's doing 2 attacks, and the +2 to dice rolls, which means it isn't +2 to their attack, it's +2 to their dice rolls, to the d20. So you roll an 18, that is now a 20, that is now a critical hit. So I know in my first game, I got Chloe'd and Grabbleshanks, basically, where his Grabbleshank, I think, rolled the crit thanks to inspiration, and then second attack. So I think dealt oh goodness, 7 to 8 damage. Taking my poor Staghar down to Blood Eater last click immediately, which was insane. I knew Grabble was gonna hit hard. I did not expect all of that, and it was a lot of it was thanks to Chloe giving essentially 2 damage, because hitting twice. It's just incredibly strong. The other interesting thing that I have been sleeping on, I will say, I've slept on this character a lot. Both Brian and Doug both played Ayer, which is the what's the race? Okay, now I'm blanking on the Aarakocra. No, is it Aarakocra? No, what is the? Now I'm gonna have to look it up. No, I was right. It was the Aarakocra. The Aarakocra, drunken master monk. The reason why Ayer is especially good in this format is because of the tournament scenarios. Frogmire Coven has a lot of water. Water is hindering for movement, which means it takes 2 movement points to move through 1 space. Think of it like rough terrain. So Harpers have 2 characters that can kind of circumvent that. That's Ayer, and that's Nurith. Nurith has fastly become incredibly good. I also slept on Nurith originally, but Nurith... let's talk about Nurith first. So Nurith's a rogue, 4 movement. What Nurith does that is incredibly good is Ambush Master. That is the reaction after initiative cards are assigned. Exchange your initiative cards with the initiative 1 card. So you usually save that for when you're not first player. You hope you probably get one of the lower initiatives, like a 9-10. And then when you're playing Nurith, depending on what you want to happen that match, depending on if there's someone you're close to taking out, or like an NPC you're about to take out, you use Ambush Master to take their 1 and give them the 10. And that dramatically changes the game for your opponent. They could be used... Now, good opponents would probably catch on that you have Nurith and either play their own Nurith or not put their 1 on the person that you don't want. If you're trying to get someone out of dodge, trying to make sure you don't put the 1 on them, and just know, hey, hopefully they can survive to turn 3. Nurith on its own, besides that, is still very strong. Cast Net is great for rooting. And the damage isn't bad. 2 damage for the spear is not bad. And the ambush is another thing that's good. +1 damage against enemies who have not activated this round. You can play that pretty well, especially with Ambush Master, to have Nurith be doing pretty significant damage. Nurith only really has to combat with Abelio, which I think is slept on a little bit for his capabilities, but compared to Nurith at this point, he's not as... I don't know what to say about Abelio. I like Abelio, but Nurith has now kind of supplanted him as the go-to tactician. And then for Ire in these scenarios, once again, because of water, Ire has flight. Oh, and Nerth has amphibious, so he's able to just kind of go through the water. Ire has flight, so basically the hindering is not... He ignores it. The thing with Ire is he's slow. He's only got a 3 movement. He does have Tipsy Sway, which has a 1 turn cooldown, so it's pretty much always up. So he can move 2. And then he has Frenzy, which is very good, which allows him to just keep basically making multiple attacks. He's... How to explain him? I like Ire. I don't know if I love Ire. Because it's a +4 to hit, 2 damage. If they hit, target gains bleeding. Bleeding's always great. And then, which means they deal kind of they take 1 damage at the start of their activation. So I mean, it's the thing with Ire is that his talons, and maybe I missed this when I first read it. I think I did. His talons allow him to target 2 people as a separate attack. So he could come in, +4 to hit, 2 damage, and he could hit 2 people. And then he can Frenzy to make 2 more attacks, which effectively is 4 more attacks, because each of those basic attacks is hitting 2 people. So he could basically get kind of 6 attacks, I believe. Now, Frenzy does require a standard and a movement to do, so it's not as if you're just easily getting up there. Now, you could Tipsy Sway your way up with a bonus. I think I missed a lot of that when I was going through the reviews, and that's 100% on me. But I will say the water of Frogmire is significant. It very much changes how you have to play. So for the scenarios that we had, which we'll go over here in a second, it was clear that, Ire changed a lot of things. Now, luckily, his slow speed made him kind of comparable, and the breach mechanics that they have for it also made it not where the water was absolutely horrifying, but it was interesting to have to plan around, oh, my character usually moves for 5, now they might only move for 3 because of the water. Outside of that, like a lot of the Harpers, like I said, there's 5 Harpers, 2 Red Wizards, 1 Zentarum. Let me go over some of the rosters. Now, a lot of the main players, the top players, played with a lot of the treasures from the Benefactor set. So if you don't own the Benefactor set, I would argue a lot of those treasures, equipment, if you will, I feel like they're superior to the base set ones. So feel free to go ahead and pick up that if you have not. But Brian, let's talk about Brian and Doug's. I won't go through everyone's roster. I'll go through mine, and then I'll go through Brian's and Doug's. I believe they were playing the same roster, but I'll have to double check. So let's see. Yeah, it looks almost identical. Doug was playing Harpers. He played Grabbleshanks, Lightning Dancer, Sedona, Hangaku, yay Hangaku, Nurith, Ire, and Chloe. So nothing too crazy there. I think the general play they went with is Chloe, Grabble, Nurith, Sedona, probably Ire, maybe Lightning Dancer, really depends. For Brian, it was the same team. So they effectively printed out the same roster sheet and did it for both of them. Because they are friends, same play group. So they decided to play something very, very similar. Lexi, who was, I believe, third, she played pretty much the same team. Instead of Ire, though, Abellio was played. But Grabbleshanks, Lightning Dancer, Sedona, Hangaku, Nurith, and Chloe. I think everyone's in kind of agreement at this point. When it comes to sellswords, Hangaku's really the only one I think that makes sense on Harpers because of the role situation. Hangaku's really good, but it just kind of makes sense. For me, I played Red Wizards, and I settled on, and I don't know if this is right because I kind of just made it up the morning of. I hadn't practiced it at all because I don't own Red Wizards. Except now I do. So, I played Stagcar. That was one of the ones I wanted to play. I just knew I wanted to play Stagcar. And that is the... is it Harabi? Heron? Basically the rabbit race from D&D, who is a wildfire druid. I love wildfire druids. I also played Basra, Ashlord, Elak, Undanan, Quella, Brelton, Vendra, Fairloon, and then I did a sellsword of Drom because I wanted someone who was a little bit tankier and was able to kind of take some hits. From what I could tell you from my experience in the 3 games that I played, first off, Stagheart is really good. Giving burning is just good in general. Because you can just attack and give burning, and they basically have to stop moving in order to not continue to get burned. Very, very good. Stagheart is very easy to kill, though. Stagheart came close multiple times to dying, but that Wildfire Spirit is nothing to sneeze at. The Wildfire Spirit can be pretty good. I ultimately went with Vendra almost every single game. Vendra just gave me some of the flexibility, kind of like Lasaelle gives in the movement. I knew going into this, I knew water and hindering were going to be a concern. I knew I was going to go slow. So Vendra moves 4, but Vendra also has Writhing Tide, which is a cooldown ability movement. Move up to 6 spaces, ignoring elevation and enemies. Minis move through, gain bleeding. So while it doesn't move through hindering, that does turn my movement from like 2 squares to 3 squares. And there were times, most of the time, I sacked my standard for a movement. So this ultimately took, if I was moving just through water, 2 squares to 5 squares, which is huge. Vendra also does the kind of weird cone special attack. So a basic attack, 5 to hit, 2 damage. That was fine. Vendra was ultimately great for what I needed Vendra to be. Vendra ran out there, got me loot. In the prisoner scenarios, got me my prisoners. Was able to outrun a lot of things. It was really, really good. As for the rest of them, I chose Quella, but I don't think I ever played Quella over Stagheart. Quella was just on my list. Same with Elak. I didn't ever play Elak. I played Fairloon, which is the ranged warlock, because that 3 damage agonizing blast is just generally good. Just being able to have that in your arsenal, know, hey, I just got 3 damage at the ready from a decent range. I might drop Fairloon. It depends. Basra was pretty decent. The thought was, I was playing Drom, and I mentioned this, I think, in my Sellsword episode. Drom deals damage at the end of his activation next to anyone that was slowed and rooted. Basra, when Basra crits, let's see, is it crit or... no, with the Entangling Strike bonus action, which has a 3-turn cooldown, that slows your enemy. So I was using her in tandem with Drom to try to deal some more damage. It did not work as well as I wanted it to. And I will also mention, Basra is cool, but man, is that combat reflexes not as cool as you would hope it would be. The reaction combat reflexes after an enemy at range 1 to 2 moves, if it is no longer at range 1 to 2, make a free attack against that enemy. I don't think I ever got that reaction off, because they would just move 2 away and then get someone else into fray. A lot of times they just didn't move greater than 2. So they were always in that kind of 2 circle around Basra that I was never really able to get that off. But ultimately, I think Red Wizards is in a great place. I think more practice would have done me a lot better. But I went effectively 3-1, so I can't complain at all. I think I think I would have played around more with Jelana, perhaps. Let's see, Jelana. Yeah, probably Jelana. I don't know about Zelsha, the Poison Bard, but there's definitely some improvements I could do. Especially with Treasure. I unfortunately forgot my cards in my room, and I played with the base set. I would have rather liked to play with some of the Benefactor cards, for sure, because some of the Benefactor cards are ultimately better. So let's go through some of the scenarios that were included in the tournament. The tournament had, I believe, let's see, there were 8 scenarios. Let me go back. I'm looking at the wrong thing. Yeah. So there were ultimately, let's just go through them. You had the Horde version, the Etten, the Rescue, the Ritual, the Betrayal, and then you had Deathmatch and Contention and Capture. Deathmatch, Contention and Capture had been adjusted from where they were before. The Contention, the points, and let me just go through them one by one. Deathmatch was the same. Deathmatch, that doesn't really change. You just go, there's some loot, you take out each other. Contention is one where you stand on... you get victory points by looting a chest, defeating an armored gnoll, defeating an enemy, and then at the end of each round gain a victory point for being on a control point and basically having... like, controlling the control point. And you get that by having the most characters on there. The control points used to be in the middle on the other side of a 2x2 square, and so that led to a lot of shenanigans. You could have gotten, I believe it's like the dust of displacement, or certain things that would allow you to like warp to the other side. A Bellio could really shut down one side. There's a little too much you could do that really inhibited certain characters, especially like long range characters, with how close and how cut off that was. So, wisely so, they moved some things around. The 2 control points are now off center. They are near some armored gnolls, which were not easy to take out by far, and I think it worked a lot better. It wasn't just a let me race over there. You can't really get there in one turn, even with Lasalle. It worked. I feel like it felt fine. I felt like it was a good improvement. It's a good format. That was the one match I lost. I wasn't as aggressive as I should have been. That was the match that Stagheart got destroyed by Gravel Shanks, because I played poorly. It was dusting some rust. That was my first match. I was rusty. Should have played that a lot better. Now, I did not play the Capture one. Capture is basically move into your end zone with the relic. That's where basically you have the relic and you try to get it to each end zone. I believe they moved where the end zones are. They aren't kind of in the back of the end zone anymore. They made some mild changes, and I can see, let me compare it to the previous one. But basically, you get a victory point. You get 3 victory points for move into your end zone with the enemy relic. Defeat an enemy carrying your relic, you get a victory point. And then at the end of the game, 1 victory point for each friendly character that is not defeated, and 1 victory point for each item equipped to a friendly character. So the game ends effectively... Let's see, does it say it ends? It's 6 rounds. Oh yeah, it doesn't just end when it gets to the other side, that's interesting. But you can go out there and see the original version, which is what I'm doing now. The original version... Okay, so it's the victory points. That's ultimately what changed. Capture used to be move into your end zone with the relic and you win. And then at the end of the game, you get 2 victory points for each friendly character that was not defeated, and 1 victory point for each item equipped to a friendly character. That was changed to now just strictly, you get it into your end zone, you get 3 victory points. Period. But that doesn't end the game. The game is still 6 rounds. You then get a victory point now for taking out an enemy carrying your relic, so kind of extra incentive. That did not exist before. And then they toned it down to, at the end of the game, you gain 1 victory point for each friendly character that is not defeated, and 1 for each item equipped to a friendly. Whereas before it was 2 victory points for each friendly. So basically, before, in a capture game, if you were able to just grab that relic and just bolt to the other side as quickly as possible, you would probably win the game. Because no one would have died, you got your relic there, and it was basically grab your relic, get there first. Which isn't great balance for, like, you played against the Terran, which are a lot faster. Isn't great for that. So this kind of says, hey, well, those that are faster get a benefit. They do get 3 victory points because they got there first. But now, if you take out that character, because it ultimately inhibited, you ultimately decided, hey, I'm not necessarily going to engage my opponent, I'm just going to try to get there first. Now you want to engage. Now you can get a victory point for taking out that character. Or you decrease their victory points by taking out their characters. It's better. I think this is a much better version. I'll have to talk to the people that played it, because I believe they played this during when I was not playing. So I missed out on that. Now we hop into some of the Frogmire scenarios, because there were definitely some really good ones. The first one was the rescue. This one I think was my favorite. This one is the PvE PvP one. Your objectives is to rescue your friends, enemies, and everyone in between while fending off the kobolds and bullywugs. Defeat a bullywug ambusher, 2 victory points. First off, the bullywug ambushers are a pain. They are not easy to take out. They follow you. They go after you. They are a pain. You cannot ignore them. They give you victory points, thank goodness, but they aren't easy to kill. I think they had a 15 defense. They were not just easy to take out, and they are positioned basically by the closest prisoner, to be honest. Now, additionally on this, for this map also, when you choose characters, you choose 2 of your characters. So you have your party of 5. You choose 2 of them to begin the game as prisoners. And they are put on the map in specific spots. And they don't do anything. They get assigned activation cards, and when their activation comes, nothing happens. Because they are prisoners. So you start the game with only 3 characters. And your goal is to get out there, rescue some prisoners. Now your character prisoners are kind of in the opposite corner of the map and in the middle of the map. Once you the free prisoner, a character just has to end their activation next to them, adjacent to them, and that prisoner is, taken off the map, you get a victory point. Same with your character, except when you end your activation next to a character prisoner, they now become active and they're back to being a character. And so if their activation comes up that turn, hey, they're back, we're here. So you only get victory points once again for taking out the bullywug ambusher. There's also a Yanti archer in the middle that's worth 3 victory points. It's a much bigger character. It deals some pretty big damage. You have to watch out for that. You rescue a prisoner, you get 1 victory point. You gain an additional victory point if you rescue a character prisoner from the opposing party. So if you can make it to their character and rescue them, you get 2 victory points. The downside is they now activate at right next to you. But the plus side is that there are no victory points for taking out your opponents. So just plainly just attacking your opponent doesn't do anything. You don't get victory points for taking out an enemy. Now, if your character is sacrificed, you lose 1 victory point. So ultimately, that's what happened to. Let's see. Let me read through this real quick. Prisoners. Prisoners do not activate, cannot take any actions or reactions, cannot be attacked. However, character prisoners are assigned initiative cards, as I said, and their activations are skipped. A character may rescue one adjacent prisoner at the end of their activation. Non-character prisoners are removed from the map when rescued. Character prisoners that are rescued can henceforth activate as normal, including during the round in which they are rescued, providing their initiative card hasn't already passed. If an enemy ends their activation next to 1 or more prisoners, 1 adjacent prisoner is sacrificed and removed from the map. Character prisoners cannot be sacrificed until all non-character prisoners are rescued or sacrificed. So in the case of mine, they hadn't gotten all of their prisoners. There were still some non-character prisoners out there, so I probably could have waited to activate theirs, because then that would have meant theirs was sacrificed. That would have scored me more points, but I was in the neighborhood, so I went ahead and did it. And then I was able to rescue my own character. And then it was kind of a race at that point, because he got his Vendra to race to my corner person. And luckily my Vendra was in the neighborhood also. And it was like a Vendra versus Vendra race to see who could get there first. And ultimately I won. And that was the match I won. Super cool scenario. I don't know what I would change in it. Now, there's a lot of water, like I said, but you do begin with a bridge. I believe it's a 1x4 bridge. That is like just a bonus action to put down. And you can walk on it. So it's not that bad. It's a very, very cool format. The next one I did was the Betrayal. This one was interesting, and what is even more interesting is that my match, we played this vastly different than the other team that was really playing it. So the Betrayal works as so. Effectively, you select your 5 characters to make a team. Pretty standard. Then you select 2 of your characters to be marked safe. And then you get the tokens for your 3 remaining players, the characters I should say, and you give them to your opponent. And your opponent chooses one of those and hides it from you. And then you do the same for your opponent. And then simultaneously you reveal the one character they chose, and that character is now a traitor and joins your opponent's team. And then the traitor has a special spot on the map. They start on the other side of the map, and effectively you are trying to get the traitor to the escape space. And so in order for the traitor to get to the escape space, they have to go by effectively the opponent's starting area. So we played it a little differently. We tried to avoid... Oh, also during all of this, there's a control point in the middle of the map where there's a green hag who is trying to woo your players to her to obliterate you. Now, you win the game if your traitor reaches the escape spot. It's just plain out you win, which isn't nearly as easy as the relic, because there is water in between. The opposing forces, like, they're waiting. If you defeat the enemy traitor, you get 3 victory points. If you defeat an enemy, you gain a victory point. It says on here, defeat the Yanti assassin for 2 points. Alex Davey made the decision during the tournament that the assassin probably was a little too much, so they waived the Yanti assassin. But I'm thinking maybe it would have been fine. And then you get 3 points for taking out the green hag. So where it's different from what our game was played is we just ignored the green hag altogether. The green hag only takes 1 maximum damage from range. The only way you deal damage is if you're adjacent, really. But when you're adjacent, you become poisoned and all this bad stuff happens. So we just kind of went around the hag, because the hag just sings the song and chooses the closest person to character to lure them to her. And so they use their movement speed to get closer. But with all the water, it's like you're talking 2 squares. It's not significant. So in this game, we kind of got half our team matched up with the other half of the team. And my opponent just had some really bad rolls. I feel bad. I was able to kind of take out a few of their characters early, or not early, near the end. I was able to take out their ire. I was able to take out, the kobolds on the map. There are some kobold acolytes. There are some bullywug ambushers. And they can start dealing some damage very quickly. Very, very quickly. In my game, my opponent chose my Basra, and I chose their Sedona. I probably should have chosen differently. But it was fun. It was a very fun format. I think it could maybe use some tinkering on the hag. Maybe make the hag a little bit more formidable. Just because, unless you're going specifically for the hag to get the victory points, she's somewhat ignorable. because you could just go around her because she's in the center of the map, but she doesn't move. So just ignore her. She might inconveniently move you, but sometimes that's okay. And then the last match was the ritual. That was the one with the zombies. I did not play that one. I watched it a bit on the finals match. That one needed a little bit of adjustment during the match because I believe the zombies that pop up, they do a lot of damage. And if you're not able to take them all out, it could get a little overwhelming. So I believe in the match they decided to lower the amount of zombies that popped up. I think it was like 2 originally. Yeah, at the end of each round, if the Sea Hag is undefeated, spawn up to 2 zombies and the lowest available numbered zombie spawn points. Well, those zombies aren't exactly super easy to kill, and they can add up very quickly. So they tuned that down to 1 for the tournament because the game is also about engaging with your opponent, right? It's not just zombies. You don't get any points for taking out zombies. So, but yeah, that's the scenarios for the tournament. Once again, the tournament scenarios are kind of just toned down versions of the scenarios in the game. I posted on my Facebook, the WizDad Facebook page, where exactly all the scenarios from the Coven, from the Frogmire Coven. So definitely check that out. You can see what the full scenarios are. Tournament scenarios are listed on the dndonslaught.com website. Now for the updated ones, you need to go into FAQ section, and then there'll be tournament scenarios. They have kind of both of their the old version and the new version out there in separate pages. It's not in tournament resources. That's the old one. Look for the one that says updated in September, and you'll see it. And you can try that for yourself at home. If you want to try any of these tournament scenarios at your local, you could do it as well. I did explore and mention to Alex and Nick that, hey, if we're worried about getting local play, maybe if there's a way to, for at least the map portions, like not necessarily all the other things, but just the maps, if there was a way to introduce a printed version that could be printed, that would be great. Just so stores can run tournaments and say, hey, we're going to provide the maps, and just go to wherever, Kinko, Staples, I don't know, and just go print out some maps, get them laminated, so that way you could just put them out for everyone. And everyone still brings their own minis, still brings all the other stuff, still incites them to get a base set, but also just has the printed stuff there. I'm going to look into seeing if I could get some of these printed. The base set, I don't think I'm going to try the Frogmire ones. The problem is that all of these maps are gridded, and when you try to print gridded maps, it could get a little wonky with sizes. It's usually better to be able to put the art down and then put the grid over it. But I'm gonna work with it a little bit and see if I can do something like that, just so I could get my local playing. Coming out of this Worlds, I have now been reinvigorated on trying to build a local community. My local game store actually asked me, okay, well, who do you think this game appeals to? Would it be better for miniature players or D&D players? And I said I think both, but I get his question because I wanted to demo this game and try to get people interested. So I'm battling with who, like, it's tough. I think D&D players would like some of the combat, but maybe not the competitive side. They might like some of the scenarios. I think competitive miniature players probably are the target. But either way, I'm going to try to start scheduling things when I have time, start trying to get some demos going in my local stores, and try to start promoting the game a bit. What I'm going to look into is trying to make my own, whether that's printed maps. Try to find a way to make my own kind of tournament kits, which, now that I think about it, that would be an awesome product for stores. Is a tournament kit, but not prizing kit, but like a purchasable kit that maybe came with just no teams, but could just come with the maps, the NPC figures, and some of the like tokens and the initiative cards, like the basics you need for a tournament without the actual factions, just so they can run tournaments. That might not be a terrible idea if that's a lower price point, but either way, Worlds was fantastic. Once again, congrats to Brian. I believe the next tournament we heard about was maybe at PAX Unplugged in December, which is in Philly. I won't be going to that because that's a pretty big expense. So hopefully we'll hear some bigger things. I think now this is usually the time of year, if you're used to WizKids at all, this is the time of year where things kind of slow down a bit. We get after Worlds, it's kind of like a big reprieve, and then things kick back up in early spring. So I'm hoping things get back up in early spring. I might even look into hosting an Onslaught tournament myself locally and try to get some players to come in for that. I also want to look into getting Onslaught onto Roll20, at least in some archaic format, to be able to play a little bit, is what I'm hoping. Enough to be where we could practice. I think right now the hardest part is it's hard to build a community when it's hard to play, and it's a little hard to play right now. But that'll do it for this episode of Whiz. Once again, stay tuned to my WizDad Gaming YouTube page. I will be posting the interviews I did with Nicholas Yu and Alex Davey, and I will be posting the different matches from Worlds. I didn't get every match. I got finals, and then I got like 1 or 2 other matches. I'll be posting that on my YouTube page and a few other things as well. But yeah, thank you guys for listening to Whiz, and I'll catch you next time.